This could be called a spiritual check-in. 18 months ago, I talked here about when I came from as a former child of evangelical Christianity. We are all on our own spiritual paths, and as someone who came to Unitarian Universalism at the age of 32, with a signed contract to become the new music director, I chose not to allow myself to simply embrace another music job, but to actually learn more about the concepts I found in this little community in Northwest Tucson and in the greater UU community worldwide. This is my follow-up, because as I told Reverend Ron, I found that new public speakers often reach for autobiographical material as a means of presenting a point. My minutes with you this morning are an autobiographical follow-up to my sermon from 2015, but they are also my spiritual check-in, an attempt to identify the place which I have termed the middle of the road. When I imagine the middle of the road, the image which comes to my mind is somebody quite ageless. I don't think of a woman in her 30s or someone caught between college degrees. Instead, I see a sight very familiar to us Tucson folk. I see a winding road leading off towards mountains, past desert landscapes on either side. It could be out beyond Gates Pass or at multiple places around here. I see the road behind and the road in front. I see myself standing in that road, as I have often done in reality when there are no cars coming on that stretch of road between Gates Pass and Old Tucson. Quite literally, I see the middle of the road. The middle of the road refers not to my age, but to my place of spiritual and emotional growth. I am joined by people of all ages, and I am comforted by the fact that I have been on this road before. Where do we go? Are we on the right journey? I have never wanted to move to the Southwest. And although this might cause a bit of offense, I will honestly admit that my gut feeling was right. I don't belong among the cacti, the mountains, the sun, the heat, or the desert sky. Every day, I wake up hoping for rain, missing the sound of the wind in the leaves. I pine for the smell in the air as the seasons change, for the water, for the skies the color of silver, for rolling green hills, for the immense joy and accomplishment on that first bright spring day when another winter has been successfully conquered and there's nothing ahead but spectacular summer, for the crispness in the air on a beautiful fall day, for the silent, sharp depth of a winter's cold night, for cherishing the promise of spring to come. I pine for ordering a burrito covered in salsa and knowing that unless I specify otherwise, I will get it so mild that it might as well be unseasoned gazpacho soup. My husband's in the back, he can completely attest to this. He's been trying so hard to get me to like spice, it's not working. I always knew that I would feel this way about my home, my Michigan. So why did I leave it? To share this concept of the middle of the road with you, I'd like to share with you my story as to why I came to Arizona. Hint, it was not for retirement. In 2013, the private school where I was a music teacher declared bankruptcy. I wasn't a certified teacher, merely a woman with 2 bachelor's degrees in music. Knowing that I needed to have a teaching position on my resume, I held on as long as I could and attempted to ignore the empty payroll box in the staff mailbox area. At a certain point, I went for weeks without being paid. I began working random side jobs, trying unsuccessfully to make money stretch across my monthly expenses. We've all been there. On top of that, I was in the middle of a truly toxic relationship with a good man whose own struggles mixed with mine and left me in a self-propelling downward spiral. Everything seemed to come to an end at the same time. I found myself completely without income. I finally had enough of working without a guaranteed paycheck and resigned. Then I got the phone call I had been dreading for 2 years. And just like that, I was a single woman again. That night, I went to choir rehearsal. the same ensemble where I had met him 5 years earlier. I walked across the concrete plaza leading up to the tall glass building where the ensemble rehearsed. The second floor, as usual, was lit with huge colored mosaics on the walls, and the faces in them seemed to leap towards me down there on the plaza level, filled me with so many memories of each time he and I had walked past them. A sudden wave of nausea came over me, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't walk up there. I couldn't go in, not tonight. In the black cold, I stood. It was February, and the wet wind surrounded me. Middle of the road, brick wall moment. Now what? The solution to my brick wall moment was one of calculation. For whatever reason, my mind, already geared through a lifetime of fighting towards survival instead of succumbing, ran through the list of graduate schools which had open deadlines for choral conducting. There was one on that list with a big reputation. Calm, rational, decisive. I walked through the doors, up the stairs, past the mosaics, and straight to the choir's artistic director, who happened to be the chair of conducting at the University of Michigan. I had known him since I was 8 years old. I asked for a recommendation letter to be sent to the University of Arizona immediately. 6 months later, I packed my car with everything I owned and drove west of the Mississippi River for the first time in my life. It was a life anew. Like so many before me, I came to Tucson to start over. I settled in the graduate student housing. I went to classes. I learned that some cacti may look fluffy and soft, but finding out that they are not will cost quite a bit of needless time pulling nearly invisible needles out of one's skin. I found that I could love again. Not in the place in which I was living, but with the people I was living with. Since then, my life journey has changed in every possible way, and it seems to have been for the better. My journey has gone in the right direction so far. Middle of the road. How many times have you been there, and how many times more will you go back to that spot? I've had countless. Middle of the road, when I stood in front of my mother and announced as a teenager that I would not participate in another one of my church's pro-life gauntlets down the streets of downtown Traverse City. I had not yet defined my political or moral ethics, which now hold me together, but I knew that I was no longer the girl who could take part in an archaic cluster of legends and outdated laws as mandatory in my life. The middle of the road means both being between two ideas and between two selves. It could be a journey, it can be a moment. I'm in one now. I'm standing on the road between Gates Pass and Old Tucson several times over. Spirituality is a middle-of-the-road place for me. I would like to define spirituality as whatever gives meaning to life. Like a child flailing its arms, I find myself supported by the strong hands of Unitarian Universalism, but those hands do not swaddle or smother me as my Christian past once did. I find myself given the freedom to move, and that makes me uncomfortable. You see, I'm constantly called back to my Christian roots, and yet I cannot accept what they stand for. I will admit that when I hear a Christian hymn, I find myself in a higher spiritual place, yet I took too many medieval history classes to ever go back. I respect my former faith as one respects Apple. It's a beautifully well-oiled machine, with the iPhone we all want and a price tag to match. I admit also, however, that sometimes it is difficult for me to sing my hymns, for which I know the original text, here at MVUU. For those who don't know, half of our hymns are hymns I grew up with in Protestant faith, but we've altered the words. Mm-hmm. My middle-of-the-road journey is very faith-defining. It is a journey I will be on for a long time. I know that I can have faith. I know I want it to have more shape and more definition. I know that my faith can never again conflict with my morals, political viewpoint, understanding of science, and my understanding of history. Beyond that, I am still walking. I stand before you now as someone who has admittedly made a lot of mistakes in my life. It's a lot easier to preach about the value of sacred music through Western history, as I have done, or to share my early life story as a reflection/testimonial, as I have done. It's a lot harder to get up in front of you today and to preach as if I feel I have the right to do so. All I can think of are the times, big and small, when I failed in some way to do something that was needed of me. I include MVUU in that statement. If any of you have ever tried to email me, you know what I'm talking about. I'm in the middle of the road for a lot of things. And one of those things is my journey towards being a successfully organized human being who does not feel overwhelmed by even the smallest tasks requiring organization. So please, as I make the crux of my statement today, allow me to express a disclaimer for my own sake. I'm sharing a concept which I am learning. I am not preaching. I'm learning that the middle of the road is a place for constant spiritual check-ins. It is a place to use the experience you've had and to apply them to how you see the world. I'm learning that not all of my experiences reflect the world as a whole. In fact, probably none do. I'm learning through my time at NVUU and through so many of our previous guest speakers and through Ron's reflections that we are truly privileged on a scale in which we could never imagine. Just the fact that we are here in this developed, albeit politically and morally confused country, says that we are not the norm. Our reality is very different from the realities felt all over the world. That being said, it is still our reality. The pyramid of well-being places survival tactics at the bottom, but the top is dedicated to psychological enlightenment. We are still on a journey, even if ours differs from others. May we not be so blinded, though, by our own journey that we cannot see theirs. The middle of the road is the most perfectly perplexing place to be, because it encourages us to walk in one direction or in another, yet gives us no guidance aside from where we have been. Often we cannot see the end of the road, and we do not know what our destination will be. If our road has forks in it, we are forced to choose, and we often choose blindly. It should be noted in regards to guidance that there is something there. The road provides us with little clues as to how we should travel. Maybe we do not have the name of the destination or know the length of time it will take to get there, but we have some help. The white line down the side, the yellow line down the middle, the shoulder for which when we need to pull over and think. I see the white line as a metaphorical guide on our life's path. It keeps us on the path. When we see its reflective quality in the dark or in the snow, we do not veer off the road into danger. For those of us who come from the north, we know its value. We know what it feels like when it's almost like you're in Star Wars and light speed and the snow comes at your face and you've got your brights on, which is a big mistake. And the flakes, if they're white and thick and heavy, they shoot at you and you can't see really what's in front of you. You can't focus because of the way the flakes are coming at you. But the white lines on the sides, they're so reflective you can keep an eye on them and they will keep you straight even while it seems like you're going through a tunnel. So what is this white line? What is the white line standing for? Most would say religion. I would call it faith. I cannot believe that one single religion has truly monopolized the essence of truth in our existence. I have faith, though that we all have means of finding truth within us. I also have faith in my ability to someday be able to read sentences in my speech as well as Ron does, because he never seems to make those typos. The only common denominators that truth holds is a love for life and a need for our own well-being without harming others. I believe that we are, just as we have a rainbow of diversities in every way, that we all have a rainbow of different truths. Of course, harming others happens along the way in many forms. There are those moments when you cross the white line and you veer past into the shoulder. Even if your intentions were good, the result, perhaps even due to too much effort, took you beyond the truth and into danger. It's a small white line, but it stays with us on the road, as we walk, as we drive. When I came to Tucson, I traveled a long way first. I traveled 2,200 miles. The road became my friend as I moved in and out of areas with radio stations or cell phone service, without radio stations or cell phone service. The great open spaces I had never seen before surrounded me on all sides, but the road remained the same. The white line never faltered. Faith is that white line. It's hard to lose sight of it as long as you are looking. When you do lose sight of it, faith, in its unseen presence beyond the darkness or beneath the snow, will help your eyes to see it again. Perhaps that is the most incredible thing about the road. The white line does not waver, and the road itself does not waver. Its presence is always seen and felt, and it allows us to move perpetually. They say that when you've walked the El Camino, the old pilgrim's route to Santiago de Compostela, that you have 3 periods of enlightenment. During the first 200 miles, your body fights you. It screams for its life. Then finally it subsides, it gives up, and it lets you open yourself up physically. During the next 200 miles, your mind fights you. It screams for its life. Then it finally subsides, and it gives up, and it lets you open yourself up mentally. Finally, when the mind and body have been stripped away, the spirit is free to conquer your last 200 miles. It is in this 200 miles that they say you find the enlightenment you came looking for. I stand on that starting line, knowing that half of the journey was behind me and getting to this place, but the other half is in front of me and is just as treacherous. I stand in the middle of the road. I have no conclusion, not yet. But if you happen to be cruising past Gates Pass on a quiet day, you just might see my car pulled off to the side of the road and me standing there waiting patiently for you to move along. This desert may not be a place where I can find home, but I was called here for a reason, and I will suck every microbial of goodness and self-enlightenment from that reason. I'm so far from perfect, so far from even being a mature and reasonable human being, but that might just be exactly the point.